Today we're looking at a crucial part of the Bible, Matthew 20, verse 17 to 28. Here Jesus talks to his disciples about something really important for the third time. Let's break it down in simple terms. Jesus and his 12 disciples are on their way to Jerusalem. He knows what's coming, and it's not pretty. He pulls his disciples aside and says, "Listen up, guys. We're going to Jerusalem. When we get there, I'm going to be handed over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They're going to condemn me to death and turn me over to the Romans. I'll be mocked, whipped, and crucified. But don't forget, on the third day, I'll rise again." Imagine hearing this from someone you've been following, someone you believe is the Messiah. It's a lot to take in. Jesus is talking about his suffering and death, but also his resurrection. He's being straight with them about what's going to happen. Right after this heavy news, something surprising happens. The mother of James and John, two of Jesus' disciples, comes up to Jesus with her sons. She asks Jesus for a favor. "Grant that these two sons of mine may sit, one at your right and the other at your left, in your kingdom." Jesus responds, "You don't know what you're asking. Can you drink the cup I am going to drink?" He's asking if they can endure the suffering he's about to face. James and John say they can. Jesus tells them, "You will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. Those places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father." When the other 10 disciples hear about this, they get pretty upset with James and John. It's like they're all competing for the best spots in Jesus' kingdom. So Jesus takes this moment to teach them something important. He calls them all together and says, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." Jesus is flipping the script here. He's saying that true greatness isn't about power or position. It's about serving others. It's about humility and putting others first. Jesus himself is the ultimate example of this. He came to serve, not to be served, and he's going to give his life for others. Jesus knows he's going to suffer and die, but he's also confident in his resurrection. He's telling his disciples, this is part of the plan. It's going to be tough, but it's necessary. He's preparing them for the reality of what's to come, but he's also giving them hope. James and John's request shows that even those closest to Jesus can sometimes miss the point. They're thinking about glory and status, but Jesus redirects them to think about service and sacrifice. He's showing them that his kingdom is different from the world's kingdoms. It's not about climbing the ladder or being the boss. It's about serving others and making sacrifices. This passage is powerful because it shows us Jesus' commitment to God's plan, his willingness to suffer for our sake, and his teachings on true greatness. He's leading by example and teaching his disciples and us that the way to true greatness is through serving others, not seeking power or position. Let's think about how this applies to us today. In our world, we often see people chasing after power, status, and recognition. But Jesus is teaching us something different. He's saying that if we want to be great, we need to be willing to serve others. It's not about being the boss or having the most influence. It's about humility and putting others first. Jesus lived this out in the ultimate way by going to the cross for us. He showed us that true greatness comes from self-sacrifice and love. When we serve others, we're following his example. We're living out the values of his kingdom. So next time you think about what it means to be great, remember Jesus' words. Greatness in his kingdom is about being a servant. It's about putting others first and following Jesus' example of love and sacrifice. This is the heart of his message in Matthew 20, verse 17 to 28. This teaching is simple, but incredibly profound. It challenges us to rethink what it means to be successful and important. It calls us to live lives of service and humility, just like Jesus did. And that's a message worth remembering and living out every day. Let's keep going and dive even deeper into what Jesus is teaching here in Matthew 20, verse 17 and 28. We've talked about how Jesus predicted his suffering, death, and resurrection, and how he explained to his disciples what true greatness looks like. Now let's explore what these teachings mean for our everyday lives. First, let's remember that Jesus knew exactly what was coming. He knew the pain, the betrayal, and the death that awaited him. Yet he willingly went to Jerusalem. This shows us his incredible courage and commitment. He wasn't running away from his destiny, he was embracing it. Think about that for a moment. How often do we try to avoid tough situations or challenges in our lives? Jesus shows us that sometimes we need to face difficulties head-on because there's a greater purpose behind them. Now let's talk about James and John and their mom. Their request for positions of honor in Jesus' kingdom might seem a bit selfish, but let's be real, it's a very human thing to do. We all crave recognition and status in some form. But Jesus uses this moment to flip their thinking. He's not angry with them, he's teaching them. He says, "You don't know what you're asking." He then asks if they can drink the cup he's going to drink, meaning, can they handle the suffering he's about to endure? They confidently say yes, but Jesus knows it's not that simple. This part of the story teaches us about humility. We might think we're ready for big responsibilities or honors, but Jesus reminds us that with great power comes great responsibility, and often great sacrifice. It's not about the glory, it's about the willingness to serve and suffer for others if necessary. Then there's the reaction of the other 10 disciples. They get upset with James and John. This shows that even among Jesus' closest followers, there was jealousy and competition. But Jesus uses this tension to teach them a critical lesson about leadership and greatness. He says that in the world, rulers and leaders often dominate and control others. But in his kingdom, things are different. To be great, you must be a servant. To be first, you must be willing to be last. Let's break this down further. What does it mean to be a servant? It means putting others' needs before your own. It means helping others without expecting anything in return. Jesus isn't just talking about a one-time act of kindness. He's talking about a lifestyle of serving others. This is countercultural because our world often tells us to look out for ourselves first. But Jesus is saying, no, look out for others first. Jesus lived this out every day. He healed the sick, fed the hungry, and washed his disciples' feet. And ultimately, he gave his life on the cross. This is the ultimate act of service and sacrifice. Jesus didn't come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. This means he paid the price for our sins, something we could never do on our own. So how can we apply this to our lives today? Start small. Look for opportunities to serve those around you. It could be as simple as helping a neighbor with groceries, volunteering at a local shelter, or just being there for a friend in need. These small acts of service add up and make a big difference. Also, check your heart and motives. When you're doing something good, ask yourself, am I doing this to be seen and praised, or am I doing this out of genuine love and care? Jesus calls us to serve with a pure heart, not for recognition, but out of love. Let's not forget the bigger picture. Serving others and putting them first is not just about actions. It's about attitude. It's about seeing the value and worth in every person and treating them with the love and respect they deserve. It's about creating a culture of kindness and humility wherever we go. In our workplaces, we can lead by example, showing respect and kindness to our colleagues. In our communities, we can look out for those who might be struggling and offer a helping hand. In our families, we can show love and support even when it's hard. This is how we bring Jesus' teachings to life in our everyday world. So to wrap it up, let's remember what Jesus taught us in Matthew 20, verse 17 to 28. He predicted his suffering, death, and resurrection, showing his commitment to God's plan. He taught his disciples that true greatness comes from serving others, not seeking power or position. And he showed us through his life and death that the greatest love is to lay down one's life for others. As we go about our lives, let's strive to follow Jesus' example. Let's serve others with humility and love. Let's look for ways to put others first. And let's remember that in God's kingdom, greatness is measured by how well we serve and love those around us. This is the heart of Jesus' message, and it's something we can all strive to live out every day.